news and information leader. Naledi Moleo on SAFM.
All right, so now we're talking land. What's the plan for youth? Activate Change Drivers in association with different stakeholders convened on the 6th of May at Belegeng Community Hall in Swaziland during the 4th episode of the Activate Imbizos that have been taking place throughout the country. And this time around, they were discussing the issue of land. I was able to attend that Imbizo, and I must tell you, this is a discussion that took place between, obviously the list of panelists that they have, but in the audience, primarily high school students. And I was quite blown away by the comments that were coming from the students, the questions and comments that were coming from high school students on land. To talk more about what happened at the Imbizo, I have on the line Kanyisa Booi, change driver from Activate. Kanyisa, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Naledi, and thank you very much.
So good to have you with us. So I think let's start from the beginning and just tell us about what Activate Change Drivers is.
So Activate is a network of young people all around South Africa committed to driving change through innovation for the better good of the country. So it is a program that is dedicated to upskilling young people that are already doing great things in their own spaces.
Right, and the purpose of this Imbizo, I say you want to have a discussion about land reform. You want to do that with high school students. Do they even understand the topic on the table?
I think it's the perfect time to start having that conversation. I think that too often change has been made a prerogative of grown-ups. And when we're talking about young schoolgoers, we're looking at people that in about 6 to 7 years will be people that are already having their own babies, people that are already going to school, people that will join the workforce. So it's a critical conversation to have with people that are going to be the future of their country. Yeah. We're under the impression that they do not understand issues of land. I think that it's been clear through the conversation that they are very clear of the issues that are coming up in terms of land. You can look at some of the comments that they made that it's difficult to study agriculture when you don't have the land to practice agriculture in. Coming from a school-going learner, it's a very pertinent conversation. Like what they're saying is, you can't ask me to study agriculture when in practice I can't even go to a plot and actually plant something and see if the things I'm learning in theory can be done practically in practice.
Yeah. Now, I remember
the young lady. Definitely a perfect audience, yes.
Yeah, I remember the young lady that said that, and I thought, now that there's an example of bringing it right down to where she is and what the impact really is. But what do you want these students to do with the conversation? It's all good and well to say they need to start having it now, but I get I was concerned that we're reminding young people of the inequalities perhaps that exist in the country, but we're not telling them what can be done.
You would be, let's start with the reminder. The fact of the matter is they're living the inequality. And so even if we don't remind them, it's their everyday life. And I'm sure that they wish it could be better. They wish that it could change. And so in an instance like the Imbizo, it's almost like saying, it's also on you, it doesn't have to, you don't have to live another 10 years to realize that your voice is critical in this particular conversation. Your input is critical in this particular conversation, because when I was 17 years old, I didn't think that it was important for me to say anything that had anything to do with the country. But the Imbizo was saying to those young people, look, inequality exists. You, in your youth, with what you've got, with what you know, have got to start seeing how you can start changing things for the better for you. How do you really practice agriculture when you've got a small plot? How do you set your food in your own space when you've got a small plot? Yeah. What can you really do practically rather than the conversation?
And how do you have this discussion then with teenagers without racializing it? And that's an important point, because anytime we talk about land, it does become a racial discussion, and vice versa. You talk race and it goes back to land as well. Then you say to young people, land, and they start questioning what it means to be black, what it means to be white in this country. And there's also the fear that you are then deepening the divide. So what do you say to that? How do you have the discussion with them on land and race without, deepening the divide between black and white?
I think asking the right questions is critical in such things. Because unfortunately we've all got memory scars that we carry from our parents and our great-grandparents. It's critical for these young people to also be aware that these things do exist, not for them to think that when they experience it, there's something wrong with them, to know that it exists. But what is important is asking critical questions, such as, what do you think the possibilities are? So you also move to a point of, yes, it has happened, but what are the possibilities, to then widen the mind in thinking about solutions. But something that we've learned at Activate is it's not possible to get to a point of solution without really truly understanding what the issue is. And yes, the land question is a question of race as well. We can't talk about the land question without talking about people being dispossessed. Dispossessed by who? This is the next question. You can't talk about that without actually answering those questions. And so even in the history of the country, if they're not learning it at school, they've got to learn it somewhere. And I think in having those conversations and also asking the question, it then gets to a point where a young person understands what happens, looks at possibility and sees or looks at what their part is, if any. If there's a part that they can play, then how do they play their part in deeply understanding what the issues of the country are, but also in really land acquisition. How do I, as a young person, begin to look at land acquisition? What is out there for me as I move forward as a young person? Does my grandfather have a piece of land? Do I need to look at beyond 18, applying for land restitution? These things are things that are out there, and there's things they need to be aware of. These things are things that are possible.
Yeah, I was shocked by one young lady who stood up, and I have to tell our listeners what she said. She stood up and she said, why are we sitting here having this discussion about land? Land this, land that. We're going to sit here and talk about land because we want the land back, when the reality... Understand, this is a teenage girl. When the reality is, even if we do get the land back, black people are only going to build big houses and white people give us jobs. I thought that says a lot about the thinking of young people on what it means to be black, what contribution you make to the economy. And that says there's a mind shift that needs to happen right from the beginning.
Look, I think you've actually just come home on that point, in that if we don't have these conversations, young people, particularly young black people, will think that is what black people are. The issue of infantilizing black people and saying they would not be able to take care of the land would not produce, therefore people would be out of jobs. It's not true. Who works the land currently? Who is doing work? Who is producing our vegetables and our fruits? Who's working the land? It's black people. Black people do work hard. And also it's critical for also young people to understand that it's not also only about commercially acquiring land. It's also for you as a human being to have the dignity of having your own space. Saying that piece of land is my piece of land. I will build my place for myself and my kids and their kids, because the issue of land is very closely linked to that of dignity. How are you walking around dignified if you don't have a piece of land where you can plant food to eat for you and your kids, and you can have a place to live in? So it's not only about getting a job and going to pay rent with dignity in that.
Yeah, let's take your calls on this discussion. The number's 0891 104 207. I have on the line Kanyisa Booi, change driver with Activate Change Drivers, talking to us about the Activate Imbizo that took place last Friday in Swaziland with the high school students and other members of the community as well, talking about land reform. Taking your calls on 0891 104 207. Again, that's 0891 104 207, or send me your SMSs to 34701.
Our best conversations are the ones we have with you. Call us on 0891 104 207. Tweet at SAFM Radio or SMS 34701. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
All right, chatting to Kanyisa Booi of Activate Change Drivers on the Activate Imbizo that took place around the theme Land and Land Reform. I'll take your calls 0891 104 207. Now, what were some of the recommendations that came out of this discussion? Because, we sit down, we talk, but let's hear from the ideas that young people are sharing as well.
Some came through Twitter. There was a conversation. There was something that came up to say those that are in academia and the powers that be need to really look at if land was restituted and people did have land, what would be the implication economically? So how would it translate? Would there be such high dependency rate if people had their own pieces of land? And also looking at land that is not too far away from the central space, because something that we've seen is that there's still quite a lot of spatial inequality. So you've got land that's given back to people, but it's so far away from where they work that you still have shacks that are built close to the cities. So then it doesn't, you get an issue where it looks like restitution is not working, but it's too far out. So it's really recommendations that I made to the powers that be to say, look, what would be the economical implications? That's the one. Secondly, shouldn't land restitution happen closer to economic points where if I'm working somewhere in mid-Cape Town, it's not somewhere very far away that I still need to stay in Kukuletu, in Khayelitsha to be able to access work.
Yeah. A few callers on the line. Eddie's your calls on 0891 104 207. Again, that's 0891 104 207, or send me your SMSs to 34701.
Our best conversations are the ones we have with you. Call us on 0891 104 207. Tweet at SAFM Radio or SMS 34701. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
All right, chatting to Kanyisa Booi of Activate Change Drivers on the Activate Imbizo that took place around the theme Land and Land Reform. I'll take your calls 0891 104 207. Now, what were some of the recommendations that came out of this discussion? Because, we sit down, we talk, but let's hear from the ideas that young people are sharing as well.
Some came through Twitter. There was a conversation. There was something that came up to say those that are in academia and the powers that be need to really look at if land was restituted and people did have land, what would be the implication economically? So how would it translate? Would there be such high dependency rate if people had their own pieces of land? And also looking at land that is not too far away from the central space, because something that we've seen is that there's still quite a lot of spatial inequality. So you've got land that's given back to people, but it's so far away from where they work that you still have shacks that are built close to the cities. So then it doesn't, you get an issue where it looks like restitution is not working, but it's too far out. So it's really recommendations that I made to the powers that be to say, look, what would be the economical implications? That's the one. Secondly, shouldn't land restitution happen closer to economic points where if I'm working somewhere in mid-Cape Town, it's not somewhere very far away that I still need to stay in Kukuletu, in Khayelitsha to be able to access work.
Yeah. A few callers on the line. Eddie's on the line from Oudendaalsrus. Eddie, good evening.
Yes, thank you very much, my sister. During the day we are gossiping about you. I'm sure it doesn't amount to treason.
That's why my ears were itchy, man.
No, I'm saying this is a good topic. And I'm happy that this thing is it's a baiting pass to young people. One appreciate that, because the young people is our future. And I've realized that most of the people who are now supplying this big business is young people. And let me tell you, that is well appreciated. And I hope the lady will also come to the Free State. And I know the MEC in the Free State, and that I know he'll definitely appreciate when these ladies come to the Free State and make sure that young people in the Free State get to this market and make sure that they become suppliers for this big business. Thank you very much.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much for calling. What we'll do is we'll share your details with Tulu and we'll pass them on to Kanyisa and the Activate team, and perhaps they can bring the next Imbizo to the Free State. Such a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
I wonder what they were saying about me as they gossiped about me this afternoon. Faisal is on the line from Durban. Faisal, good evening.
Good evening. I must say that I'm very, very proud of those young ladies. 30 years ago, they wouldn't have had this opportunity. And really...
Faisal? Oh, we seem to have lost Faisal. So, two callers saying they approve of what you're doing, that it's good work. Kanyisa. So, just talk to me about whether or not you got a positive feedback from the rest of the community about bringing in their children into a hall to talk about land.
I mean, the feedback has been quite positive. I think a lot of the time the assumption is that there isn't much that you can hear, especially from teenagers, that is of sense. So there's a high level of appreciation from the community for just actually having that voice-giving space, invitation for young people to come and talk about critical matters in the country. So it was definitely highly appreciated by the community.
Yeah, give us Twitter handles and contact details so that we can follow what Activate is doing.
Activate's Twitter handle is at ActivateZA, and it's a capital letter A. And I'm also on Twitter. It's at Kanyisa Booi, Booi, on Twitter. And we also have a Facebook page, Activate Change Drivers. There's a Facebook page. We're also on Instagram. So you can just see some of the work that we do with young people in Live in Color. And that is at Activate_ZA.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, Kanyisa, and continue the great work. Be sure to update us on other discussions that you're holding with young people across the country.
We will absolutely do. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Naledi.
Such a pleasure, and it was such a special experience attending this Imbizo as well. Kanyisa Booi, change driver from Activate Change Drivers. You're still on the Talk Shop.
Welcome to this 1-minute break in your day. Breathe deeply as the tension melts away. Become aware of the rhythmic rise and fall of your chest and relax. Let the stress of standing in a queue leave your body and mind forever. Coughing woman with a crying baby at the front of the queue floats away on a cloud, never to return. The specks of dandruff on the man's shoulders in front of you turns into snowflakes as you find yourself drinking hot chocolate in a log cabin in Switzerland. Let the thought of never queuing to pay your TV license free your mind and your schedule forever. Get your Zen back by paying your TV license online, anywhere, anytime. That's how we make a difference. And exhale.
104.4, the home of SAFM in Durban. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
You're on the Talk Shop on SAFM. Now, the Health Minister wants to wean young girls away from sugar daddies. The Department of Health will launch a program next month designed to keep young women away from so-called sugar daddies. And the Minister of Health joins me now on the line, Dr. Aaron Motswaledi. Doctor, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. I know you've been so busy.
Good evening, Naledi, and good evening to the listeners.
Yeah, it's so good to have you with us. Talk to me about the 5 objectives of this campaign.
Naledi, let's start here first. Because it gives me jitters, I started this morning getting very worried that this campaign is said to be a campaign to deal with sugar daddies. I really want us to steer away from there, because that's not what this campaign is really all about. It includes that, but it's not the real reason. It's a bigger campaign than that. It deals largely with issues that are affecting girls